Doug McDermott is one of the greatest college basketball players of all time, being one of only 3 players to score 3,000 points and grab 1,000 rebounds in his entire NCAA career. But since his famed college career, Doug has struggled to find his place in the NBA and has bounced from Chicago to OKC and now finally to the New York Knicks. This video will cover his entire career to date, the beginnings in Iowa, his college career for Creighton, his struggles in the NBA, and whether or not the start to this season is a flash in the pan or if McDermott has finally adjusted to the NBA. Doug McDermott was born into a basketball family. His dad, Greg McDermott, had been a basketball coach his entire life, and when Doug began to grow, he seemed destined to play basketball at some professional level. This would begin in Ames High School in Iowa, where Doug would play alongside high school All-American and now Dallas Maverick Harrison Barnes. The two large forwards were both incredibly skilled and athletic, far more so than their high school competition, and would absolutely dominate for Ames. During their combined junior and senior years, they would combine to win 53 consecutive games and 2 state titles. Doug would average 20.1 points and 7.8 rebounds in a backseat style role to Barnes, who was the more athletically gifted and touted prospect. At the end of his high school career, Doug was only considered a 3-star prospect and was the 28th ranked small forward in the country. Out of high school, Doug would initially commit to Northern Iowa, where his dad was coaching. However, his dad would move jobs and accept the head coaching role at Creighton, and Doug requested to be released from his commitment so that he could follow his father. Iowa granted this request, and father and son would head to Creighton for their first season together. McDermott would immediately make his mark as a 3-point sniper who was also a gifted and versatile offensive player. As a freshman, he would start every single game he played, and averaged 14.9 points and 7.2 rebounds a game. He set a conference records for most points by a freshman and was given first-team All-Conference honors in his first year. But his sophomore season would be the true moment that McDermott would really announce himself on the national stage. Doug burst out to average 22.9 points and 8.2 rebounds a game on an absolutely amazing 60.1 field goal percent shooting and 48.6 3-point percent shooting. In this season, he would take his team to the 3rd round of the NCAA tournament and was named an AP All-American for the first time. In his junior season, it was much of the same for Doug. Very similar stats, very similar shooting, and his second All-American campaign. It was his senior year that will be remembered by Doug and Creighton fans for years to come. Doug started the year by being an incredibly selfless teammate and relinquished his scholarship so that Grant Gibbs could join the team and bolster Creighton's roster. But not being on a scholarship didn't affect Doug's performance. He would take more shots than ever before and lead the nation in scoring with an average of 26.7 points and 7 rebounds a game, in one of the single greatest college seasons of all time. McDermott would be All-American for the 3rd time in his career, whilst being the consensus National Player of the Year, winning the Wooden and Naismith Awards, as well as countless others. Doug would finish 5th on the all-time college scoring boards, ahead of Larry Bird, and was undoubtedly one of the greatest college players ever. Debate raged as to whether or not he would be able to make it in the NBA. A lot of great 4-season college players struggled to create their own shot against the incredibly athletic NBA defenses. However, McDermott was 6'8", quite strong, and had a wide array of ways to score, and was also an exceptionally talented shooter who was fantastic at running through screens and shooting on the catch. I was pretty indifferent on McDermott in the draft. I thought he could be a solid shooting role player in the NBA who could average 20 minutes a game and provide good off-the-bench scoring. But the Chicago Bulls clearly thought he could replicate his college success in the NBA, as they traded the 16th and 19th pick in the draft, plus a future second rounder, to reach up to the 11th pick and snag McDermott before anyone else could grab him. Ben Falk recently wrote a fantastic article on cleaningtheglass.com surrounding Portland's draft scouting process and detailed how NBA teams do get it wrong a lot of the time. I'll link the article below, and I highly recommend checking it out and the rest of his site out, as he has amazing insight into the league as an ex-front office employee for the Blazers and 76ers. In this article, he details how, upon reflection, he has realised that whilst it is important to have different opinions on players within scouting environments, people must be careful to ensure they do not press their opinion too heavily or give it too much weight in an attempt to move the group's decision. Ben wrote about his experience with Archie Goodwin, and whilst it didn't cost Portland in this instance, I think someone in Chicago's front office was a little too enamoured with Doug McDermott. Taking Doug with one of their picks at 16 or 19 and grabbing another player on a team-friendly deal in the draft would have been fine. but cashing in both picks for a 4-year player is always going to be risky, no matter how good you think he is. This is one of those instances where I think a team's subjective view of the player outweighed just how much objective value they were giving up, especially with plenty of solid prospects remaining in the draft. But moving on from Chicago's blunder, Doug wasn't exactly a terrible pick at 11, even if I think he should have gone slightly later. And the Bulls hoped he could provide spacing for their grit and grind team with Rose, Noah, Taj Gibson, and Tom Thibodeau. He wouldn't be able to provide this spacing in his rookie season, as he averaged just 9 minutes a game and appeared in only 36 games for the year. McDermott would pick his play up over the next 2 seasons in Chicago, and was averaging around 10 points a game on good 3-point shooting, but his defense struggled and he got inconsistent minutes and shots in a slow Chicago Bulls offense. It probably didn't help Doug that his coach preached defense first, and Doug struggled with this the most during his first few seasons in the league. But just as Doug was seemingly coming to his own last year with the Bulls, they traded him and Taj Gibson to the Oklahoma City Thunder in one of the worst trades ever. The Bulls only got Cameron Payne as a long-term piece in return. And the trade didn't really work out for Doug either, as he would shoot less shots and get less minutes for the Thunder than he'd been getting for the Bulls. But the Carmelo Anthony trade between New York and the Thunder would prove to be the biggest blessing for Doug's career. The New York Knicks found themselves rebuilding around Kristaps Porzingis after the departure of Carmelo Anthony and would look to try and get as much value from their role players on a roster that lacked anything close to a second star. And whilst Tim Hardaway Jr. and Kristaps cover most of the offense with the first unit, the second unit has been an absolute revelation for the Knicks, consisting of Frank Ntilikina, Kyle O'Quinn, Lance Thomas, McDermott himself, and then usually either Hardaway or Courtney Lee. The bench mobbers helped spring the Knicks from deficits and led comebacks in the fourth quarter if the starters have failed them in that game. Now, they haven't been perfect in every single game, but it is a welcome sight for Knicks fans and Jeff Hornacek, whose teams have collapsed in the past, seemingly every time the bench checked in. The action run largely revolves around Frank and O'Quinn, who run a 2-man game to either create penetration for Frank, a roll for O'Quinn, or to get the ball to a man coming off a screen, or give it to Kyle at the free throw line so he can hit one of the other 4 players with a crisp pass. While this action is occurring, McDermott and another shooter, usually Hardaway and Lee, run a dual screen action or a down screen with Lance Thomas before springing out into space and hopefully a relatively open 3-point shot. The Knicks run heaps of variations on these plays, and sometimes will set another screen at the 3-point line for the shooter, or have Doug cut hard to the basket if his defender overcommits. The passing of O'Quinn has been super solid at hitting these guys, and Frank Ntilikina has been excellent and timing passes to shooters and cutters coming off of screens. In his first few games, McDermott struggled a little bit to find his rhythm at the start of the season, and appeared to be hesitant in taking shots on the perimeter that he should have been taking. But Jeff Hornacek got in his ear and told the college star to shoot the ball when he got it and had any amount of space. And as a result, Doug has been shooting around 8 shots a game, excluding the game against Cleveland where he only took 1 shot. Doug's confidence has been skyrocketing, and he's knocking down threes at 47% for the year, the best rate of his NBA career. Now obviously this number will drop some, but I think he will have a career year this season, as finally playing in an up-tempo system without an incredibly ball-dominant guard, where his teammates look for him to provide much-needed scoring off of the bench. Going forward, Doug is a restricted free agent at the end of this year, and I can see the Knicks wanting to retain Doug if they can get him for a cheap price. I probably wouldn't want to pay more than $8 million a year for Doug, as I doubt he can ever be more than 20 minutes per game bench scorer, but I'm sure some team will attempt to reach and overpay to steal him from the Knicks. But free agency has been crazy recently, and it's become incredibly difficult to predict who will and won't get paid. New York would love to build consistency around their young talent, and Doug is the kind of player who can be that 7th or 8th guy on a great team. They just need the top tier talent to surround Kristaps Porzingis to get there. I think they'll be eyeing Doug in free agency and match a lot of offers under $8 million a year. This obviously depends on Doug continuing his good start to the season and showing that these past 8 games haven't been a flash in the pan, but that he's finally found his groove in the NBA and a home in New York. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA videos in the future, and comment below of what you think of Doug, New York, and whether or not this is sustainable for the Creighton star.